Hey everybody, welcome back to Conscientious Omnivore. My name is Pal. You're hearing a very reverberated Pal because I'm in the bathroom of our little house that we're renovating. And I'm actually just about to knock this whole room apart and take out this wall over here. So I figured it would be a good time to show you guys my composting toilet before I have to end up moving it to another part of the house where it will be less visually pleasing even than here. Yeah, basically just wanted to show it to you guys. It is a super ridiculously simple system that I'm using. It's basically poop in a bucket style. I wanted to make something way fancier where it was going to divert the urine and keep the solids separate and all this kind of stuff, and kind of had a design worked out in my head, but then when I actually went to try to go and make it a reality, I realized that I made some key mistakes, so I ended up just going with a real simple design. I'm going to show you the inside of the box in a little bit. If anybody wants to know why I'm doing this, I'm going to put a timestamp in the description and in the top comment, so you can just jump to that if you're more interested in that. But I just wanted to quickly show you kind of what it is for anybody who doesn't know what a composting toilet is, and then I'm going to talk about benefits and all that kind of stuff later. So basically, I made a very, very simple structure. It's basically like a, I don't even know, it's not even a 2x8, it's thicker than that. I way over-engineered it. I'll talk about that in a second. But basically, I've got a bucket in there that looks just like this one. So it's just a simple, plastic bucket. And what I do is I line the bottom of it with about maybe, an inch and a half or so of this stuff, which is basically I guess it's like a peat moss kind of material. It's very nice. It doesn't have any real smell. If anything, it has kind of a pleasant, somewhat earthy smell, but it's very, very much neutral, I would say. And so I just dump some of this in the bottom, and then we just go as normal. Pee or poo, doesn't matter. And when you're done with your business, you take a nice little, amount of this, and you just sprinkle it on top, like if it was, I don't know, coffee grinds or whatever. You can use coffee grinds, actually. I've heard of people doing that. And you can use other materials. Some people use sawdust, although I've kind of seen varying, comments about the smell with that method. So I think this is a really good one. It layers pretty heavy, and it's almost like a soil as it is. You can see on my hands here. So when it breaks down along with the Humanure, it's going to make a really nice rich compost, and it's going to be great for your garden. So I'm going to talk about that later too, of what I do with it. But basically, I just keep adding more until I'm, getting to the point that I'm like, okay, I need to empty it. And I go out into my compost pile, which I've shown you guys before, and I'll insert a picture here so you guys can see it. And basically, I like to keep, some grass, hay, or whatever, leaves and stuff on top of it. And then when I'm ready to empty the bucket, what I do is I pull back the leaves or the grass, and then I dump out whatever's in there. I rinse this out with water. Later on, I wash it out with just some, mild soapy water. I use biodegradable, pH neutral, etc., like organic liquid soap, and then I'm able to just dump that on the compost as well. I just rinse it out with some more clean water at the end, and then back it goes in the box, and another layer of this peat moss goes in the bottom. So it's really simple, and I couldn't be happier with the way it works. It has virtually no odor. I will be honest with you guys. It has a tiny bit of an odor, so it's nice to be able to put this in a place where there's a little bit of ventilation. It's gotten really cold lately, so I actually don't have the window open. It's really not noticeable now, so right now I don't even smell it at all, even though I'm here in the room with it. But sometimes there can be just a little bit of a smell. I think obviously, just from practically speaking, I think it also matters how much of this stuff you're putting on to make sure you get a nice covering so you don't get any air exposure to the solid waste. So yeah, I think if if there were a few design improvements, obviously if you wanted to make it a little fancier, you could put in some kind of ventilation fan for it, exhausting outside. A lot of the really expensive compost toilets, which cost like $1,000, will have that kind of a system. You can run that off of a solar, power or a battery or anything like that. It's very, very minimal current draw, and it will exhaust any of the fumes from your box or your waste going outside, and then it will definitely be unnoticeable. And at least that's what people say, and I'm inclined to believe it because I know how little smell I have coming out of this system, and it's like ridiculously easy. So yeah, it's very simple. Let me open it up, and I'm not gonna, don't worry if anybody's worried about that, I'm not gonna show you the actual stuff inside, although pretty much all you would see is this because it's always covered. But let me take it out and I'll show you guys the inside of it just to get an idea of the construction method used. So the first thing you can see is that I've made the top kind of base a hinged, big piece of wood. I had this laying around for free. It was part of an old countertop, I believe. It was just something I had from the previous house. So I just mounted the toilet seat on there, cut out a nice hole. My brother helped me with this. Pretty easy. We just used a drill. We made a hole in there, and then we used the jigsaw and just routed out, or not routed out, but cut out the hole. Pretty simple. Like I say, I way over-engineered this. It's kind of like really stupid on my part. I should have been able to use something even half this thick, would have been fine, I believe. The next one that I build, if I get around to making one, I will definitely use thinner boards, because this actually made it kind of challenging. I had to actually cut out a big hole here. You can imagine if this wood was just a lot thinner, it would have given me more space in the front or the back. Same thing on the sides. It actually is a little bit annoying to have to put the bucket in and out because it's just so close on the edges. It's manageable, but I'm just saying it in case anybody wants to build their own. I would say go with 2x4. That's like plenty enough. This is way overkill. Like even the thickness, I don't know what that is, but that's probably like a 2-inch thick piece of wood. So kind of crazy. I also made it slightly too tall. I should have just gone a little bit shorter, maybe like 1 or 2 inches shorter, because people that are shorter than me have kind of a little bit of an annoying seat here. It's a little too tall, so your feet kind of almost like not that they hang off the end, but like they won't sit flat, so it's kind of uncomfortable for some people, especially for kids. So I would need to put like a little stool or something in front of it for them to use it comfortably. But other than that, it works great. I'm still pretty happy with how it came out. It'll definitely withstand the test of time for a long time, I would say. I basically use the same kind of wood for the corners. So I've got this basic part at the top mirrored on the bottom, and then there's similar size, or actually the same size wood going up between the two halves, so the bottom and the top half. Now originally the reason I made it so tall was because I wanted to use kind of 2 buckets and put them inside of each other and have like a diverter for the liquid waste and then have the solid waste going to the back, and it just wasn't working out the way I wanted, and I just decided to scrap the whole idea. But since I had already made the frame, I didn't want to waste it in anything like that, so I just used some more scrap wood. My dad helped me finish the whole thing, and basically we just put in some boards at the bottom here, and then that gave it enough height that the bucket was the right height, so it comes up to like right underneath this part, so it's perfect. And then we also made this little section just to kind of bump the bucket like right to that part, and it just kind of keeps it from wiggling around and moving out of the the optimal location. So it's actually really simple. Couldn't be any easier. Like I say, if I did it again, I would just make it a little bit shorter. I would still use the 1 bucket system. It's perfect, but then I wouldn't need this elevator kind of at the bottom. So yeah, it would have been even cheaper, because I could have gotten cheaper wood and made it a little bit more ergonomic, so that would have been nice. But anyway, and then all I did was I used just like I think it was like the cheapest header board that I could find. It's just like a simple pine, I don't know, whatever that is, maybe like a centimeter or centimeter and a half thick, and yeah, it's probably like 1 centimeter. And then I just nailed that on to the frame, and I just finished the whole thing with a flaxseed oil, or linseed as it's also called. So yeah, it's super great. I'm pretty happy with it, and yeah, let's get into kind of why I did this as well. Okay, so why am I using a composting toilet? The first obvious answer is that we don't have any plumbing in the house where I'm working, doing the renovations and the build out. So you got to go somewhere. So I think this was probably the easiest and simplest, quickest way I could make a place to go. So that's one reason. But there are more reasons, and there are many good reasons why I would encourage everybody to look into Humanure and what you can do with it. So basically, if you think of what we do in most Western countries now, we take clean drinking water, we put it in a bowl above our toilets, we do our business, and then we flush down our waste with clean drinking water. And with all the problems going on in the world today with regards to access to clean water and droughts becoming more and more problematic throughout all areas of the world, and just think of the resources it takes to pipe the water, clean the water, filter all the sewage, the problems it causes when it gets released unintentionally. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. If you can do something to mitigate that water wastage, I mean, that's a huge thing. And composting toilets don't require any water. I mean, I say any, but at the end of the process, I do have to wash out the bucket. But if you think about that, that's probably maybe, I don't know, let's say half a bucket's worth of water for, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 times going to the bathroom. I don't know, something like that. Compare that to a flush each time you go to the bathroom. That's a huge difference. Like, it's virtually no water being used. So the old tried and true kind of way to take care of this waste is actually a huge water saver, and that's just one of the reasons to do it. The other reason that I think is really interesting for me in particular is that wanting to garden and always thinking of the soil fertility. I've talked many times about this before in some of my debates on veganism, especially with people saying that you need animal agriculture because you need the manure from the animals to build up the soil fertility. And I've said time and time again, and I'll say it again right here, that no, you don't need animals manure, you can use human manure. Basically, there are some concerns. You obviously want to make sure you're not contaminating anything else with the your fecal matter, basically. And so you do want to take precautions. I do keep it in a separate compost pile that I'm going to be kind of using for this purpose specifically. I will be adding kitchen scraps like potato peels and apples and other kinds of things that I normally would compost in a regular compost pile as well. And I do have the grass and leaves on there as well. But what I will do is I will make sure that when I reach kind of like a full pile or whatever for that compost pile, I will actually leave that pile after that, once it's full, for at least 1 year. So basically, let's say I get to the point next summer when I say, okay, I don't want to add any more to this pile. I'm going to just leave that pile there until the following summer, and then I'll probably not even use any of that composted material until probably the fall time, or maybe the following spring. Maybe it'll be close to 2 years by the time I actually use it, or at least 1.5 years. And that is just a precaution. I think usually, from what I've read various amounts. Many people will say it's actually safe to use after about 6 months. But for everything I've seen so far, people have said after 1 year it's completely safe. I've seen people do laboratory tests on it online, and it has perfectly acceptable levels of all sorts of bacteria, pathogens, anything. It's all cleared, at least as good as any store-bought manure. And one thing that people will do in addition to waiting for the full year just to make sure is that they will also not add it to all parts of their garden. They will only add it to things that don't have any produce growing directly in the compost. So for example, like you wouldn't add it to a spinach bed or a salad, like a lettuce bed, or something that is growing in it directly, like carrots or beets or whatever. You would only add it to things that grow out above ground. So like around fruit trees or bushes or things like that, where the actual produce that you're eating is not coming through from the compost. So in that way you can be like really certain that you're not going to be contaminating any of the things you will be eating. Fruit trees are a great example, and I think a lot of people recommend that. And if you think like you can just add this around the base of walnut trees or something like that, then you have the additional kind of layer of protection where the walnuts are in the shell or the casing. So basically I'm thinking water conservation, I'm thinking soil fertility improvement, and this is something I've talked a lot about before. As an engineer, like when I was doing my studies, we always learned about systems, and where you draw your system boundaries was like really critical to understanding things like thermodynamics and heat exchange and all sorts of stuff like that. And I've said before, I can't remember in which video, but a lot of times people will try to make claims about regenerative farming, or things like Joel Salatin's farm with his his mobile chicken coops and stuff that he uses to increase the soil fertility and make sure that the animals aren't grazing down too much of the nutrients coming up through the grass and what have you. And one thing that I've seen criticized in that system is that he doesn't account for the feed that he's actually bringing onto the farm to feed the chickens, or in fact some of the other animals that he has. So he's not looking at it as a fully closed system. And obviously I think very few people nowadays are completely self-sufficient or even self-reliant. And I don't think I'll be able to be self-sufficient or self-reliant, but I will try my best to grow as much food as possible, and I would like to maintain as much of the nutrients and soil health that I can on my property. And if you think about like long term, like if you're growing from one area, you're consuming or shipping it off to somewhere else, like if you're selling it on the market or whatever, and people are eating it somewhere, and then their waste goes somewhere else. It's like a constant transfer of nutrients from the soil to the produce and then to humans somewhere else, and then the waste goes somewhere else again. And then sometimes the waste is actually too nutrient rich, and that's what ends up causing like dead zones and all sorts of fish kills and problems like that. If there's too much nitrogen or whatever, it can mess up the balance elsewhere. So water pollution is a huge concern and all this kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of good benefits to using Humanure. I remember the first time I heard about it from my brother a long time ago, a few years back, and I was actually kind of really put off by it. I thought it was like really kind of just like freakish, and like why on earth would I want to keep my poop like in a compost. And I remember just being so like weirded out by it. But then the more I've seen people doing it, and the more I've read about it and actually understood more about kind of the looking at it as a closed system, and getting the nutrients back into the soil, like where they belong, and thinking about it in that kind of like holistic manner, where in the old days people lived in a community. You would grow your food, you would consume your food locally, you would poop your food locally, and it would all go back in. And now we have this kind of like weird system where it's really easy to destroy soil fertility. And if you look, at throughout history at like various things that have happened, like the Dust Bowl in the U.S. I've mentioned this before in some of my videos on soil health. Like, modern agriculture succeeded in destroying, like, I don't even know what it was, like a meter or 3 meters. I forget exactly how many feet of topsoil, all within probably like a few decades. It probably took like tens of thousands of years for that soil fertility to build up, and then it took man all of a couple of years to destroy it all and get a Dust Bowl. So it's like, it is a huge problem, and it's something that I want to do what I can to improve the soil health in our eventual food forest. So that's it. I think the video is long enough. I probably rambled on a bit and incorporated a few other topics besides just the Humanure. But just wanted to share it with you guys and find out if anybody watching, if you guys are doing any kind of composting or Humanure composting. Let me know if there's anything else that I should be kind of aware of. I think, again, the main things that I'm doing is that I'm keeping it separate. I'm only going to be using it after it's already been sitting for at least 1 year to make sure that it's properly broken down, and I will only be adding it to things that are not direct grow produce. So I will not be putting it into like a lettuce bed or carrots or whatever. And then yeah, that should be it. So hopefully it works out. I'll keep you guys updated. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see future updates on how that's going. And thanks everybody for watching. See you in the next one.